All right, good evening, everybody. It is so wonderful to be here. It is so wonderful to spend my Monday evening learning with such an incredible group of people. It really
Hi,
is.
it is so wonderful
It
to be
is.
here. It is
Oops,
so
there we go. We got
wonderful
it doubled
to
up here.
spend my month.
Okay, so let's begin with a summary of what we spoke about last week. Last week we talked about the dangers of seeking honor. There are people, every person needs honor. Every person has dignity that needs to be preserved. And it is very dangerous if a human being does not have a very, very simple, basic honor, respect from other human beings. It becomes a big and challenging experience. Now, so that is regarding regular, ordinary honor. But then there are people who seek honor that nobody else should be bigger than them. Nobody can be more successful than them. No one can have more money than them. Nobody can have more children than them or better children than them. And this eats them up. It eats them up the fact that there are other people who can be successful, that there are other people who can do things that are better than them in any area of life. So with that, we are going to continue where we spoke last week. We said Al Kain Amr Abusenu Zechron Lebracha. Therefore, in light of the above, our sages of blessed memory declared in Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 4:21, that chapter 4, Mishnah 21, says Hakina va'atava va'akavod motzina sa'adam min olam. Envy, desire, and honor remove a person from this world. You want to know what kills people? Envy, desire, and honor remove a person from this world. Okay? Vizirunu, and they further warned us in Ethics of Our Fathers, right? Al tevakesh gedula v'al tachmod kavod. Do not seek stature and do not crave honor. Because you know what happens when you run after honor? You don't get it. You know what happens when you want to run away from honor? You get it, right? And truly running away from it, right? It may not come in the way that you thought it would come, but true honor comes to those who don't seek it, from those who run away from it. Okay, so now we start like this. Lust for honor has irrational consequences. Kama heim hamisanim barov. How many are those that endure hunger? V'yashpilus atzmam lihispanis min tzedakah, or demean themselves by being supported from charity. Rather than occupying themselves with work that they do not consider honorable. Right? How many people are there that end up being impoverished because the job that's given to them or the offer that they got wasn't honorable enough for them? For me, you're offering me such a job, and for me, you're offering such a salary. Don't you? Right? I have a dignity. Right? I'm not going to. Right? And they suffer. Out of fear that their honor will be diminished. Is there any greater lunacy than this? They prefer idleness, doing nothing, which leads to insanity, which leads to licentiousness, and which leads to theft. And each one the Talmud brings exactly how that works exactly. And to all sorts of serious sins. So what happens? Here the individual, because he has some pride, right? He has pride. He says, you think I'm going to take this job? I'm not going to. No, you're not going to disrespect me with such a job, right? And they prefer staying impoverished. And then that will lead them to boredom because they have nothing else to do, which leads them down the terrible track of idleness, which leads to insanity, which leads to licentiousness, which leads to theft, which leads to all various serious sins. all of this, in order not to lower their stature or degrade their imagined honor. So it's all in our mind. We have this imaginary honor of what's suitable for us. But that's not necessarily what's actually true. Okay? Really is a crazy thing. However, our sages of blessed memory, who always taught us and guided us on the correct and truthful paths, Amru, well, you know what they said? They declared regarding the situation, Ohov es hamalacha usna es harabonus. Love work, love toiling, and despise authority. You know what it means to despise authority? Despise being in control of other people. Despise having that honor. Right? V'amrod, and they declared even further, Pshot nivelta bishuka. Flay a carcass in the marketplace to earn a livelihood. Whatever it takes that you need to earn a livelihood, you need to do it. But it's not honorable. Me to be a garbage man. Me to, you know what? Is that what puts food on your table? Then that's what you need to do. And you need to humble yourself to not set a standard that's so high that for who the person is becomes unreasonable. Okay, there's a story in the bottom here. If you look at the bottom of page 258, let's just continue here. We'll continue here and we'll get back to it. Flay a carcass in the marketplace to earn a livelihood. V'lo seimar gavar rabba ano, kahana ano. And do not say, I'm a distinguished person, I'm a Kohen, and such work is beneath my dignity. V'amru od, and they said even further, L'olam yavod adam avoda shehi zarolo. A person should always employ himself in work that is unusual for someone like him. Ve'al yitztarach la'abirios, rather than be dependent on people. All right? So let me read to you a letter of Rabbi Akiva Eiger shows how this great and humble sage lived by this dictum. Love work and despise authority. After being a distinguished community rabbi, for many years he longed to withdraw from the public arena and devote his life to his studies as a private citizen. Writing to a former student about this goal, he describes his love for his townspeople, the financial comfort they provided him, and his many accomplishments as a rabbi. But then he says that his most fervent desire is to retire from this position. He explains that he does not wish to be held accountable for sins of his congregants should he fail to guide them properly, and also that he sees great spiritual danger in being elevated over others and striking, quote unquote, at them verbally with his sermons. He writes, I find the rabbinate to be a fate more bitter than death. I therefore said to myself, let me and my family be among the poor people who said that we need to dress in fine clothing and eat fine foods. Why, many people eat mere bread for satiety, right? Satiety, and dress in simple clothes. Let us also be like them, and I will attain the income needed for these minor expenses by working as a teacher or some similar occupation, any of which I would prefer over being a rabbi. Is it worth sacrificing the soul for the sake of a financial comfort? Right? What rabbi today would think this way? What rabbi today would think, I don't want to take responsibility for my congregants' sins because I didn't teach them properly. I don't want the honor. I don't want the financial stability, right? Rabbi Akiva Eiger was one of the greatest rabbis, and he did not want any of this. Okay? So, klal hadavarim, the sum of the matter is, hakavod hu min hamichsholos hayoser gedolim asher adam. Craving for honor is one of the greatest stumbling blocks for a person. One who craves honor does not do good for himself. Okay, one who craves honor does not do good for himself. The ef shalo liyos eved ne'eman lekono kol zman shehu chas al kvod atzmo. Lusting for honor undermines the very essence of serving Hashem. Moreover, it is impossible for one to be a loyal servant of his Creator, kol zman shehu chas al kvod atzmo, as long as he still concerns himself about his own honor. Ki al kol panim yitztorech lemayit b'kvod shamayim mipnei sichlusai. For inevitably, he will have to diminish the honor of Hashem in heaven due to his foolishness, his preoccupation with honor. Zehu masha amar David HaMelech ov Hashalom. This is what King David said when his wife Michal criticized him for dancing so enthusiastically before the Holy Ark. Unikalosi od mizos ve'ayisi shafal be'enoi. I shall act even more humbly than this, and I shall be lowly in my own eyes. Ve'akavod amiti, but in truth, genuine honor, the real genuine honor, eino el yidias haTorah be'emes, is nothing other than true knowledge of the Torah. And thus did the sages of blessed memory say, Ein kavod ella Torah. There is no honor other than knowledge of Torah. There is no honor other than knowledge of Torah. Shenemar kavod chachamim yinchalu. As it states in Proverbs, the wise shall inherit honor. V'zulaso ein ella kavod meduma v'kozev. Anything else that people consider honor is nothing but imaginary and false honor. Hevel ve'ein bo moil. It's futility that has no value. Ve'ro'ui hanoki lihinakos v'litarer mimenu tahara gemura. It is appropriate for one who practices nikiyut, which is this pristineness and cleanliness, to cleanse and purify himself from it with absolute purification. Oz yatzliach, and then he will succeed in his service of Hashem. All right. So closing remarks after a very, very, very long chapter, dealing with many different traits of cleanliness, how we perfect ourselves and cleanse ourselves. The Ramchal concludes as follows. He says, the pursuit of nikiyut, of cleanliness, should not be limited to the subjects discussed. V'hine kolalti ad heino rabim miprate nikiyus. Note that I have included up until now many of the details of nikiyut, of cleanliness, of pristineness, focusing on certain mitzvahs and character traits. V'zeh binyan av lekol shara mitzvahs v'amidos kulam. And this is meant to serve as a model for how nikiyut, this trait of cleanliness, applies to all the remaining mitzvahs and character traits. Yishma chocham v'yosif lekach v'novon tachbulos yikneh. Let the wise one hear and increase his learning, and a discerning one may acquire strategies. Meaning that if you tell a person, you give them a hint, they get the message. Right? That's a smart person, a wise person. You give them a little indication, and they learn from that message. They don't take it for granted, and they certainly don't hate someone because they give them criticism. On the contrary, what Mishlei tells us, what King Solomon tells us, is that a wise person will love the person who gives him criticism because it helps you essentially become a better person. Ramchal concludes with encouraging words about attainability, about the attainability of nikiyut, of this trait of pristineness. V'hine enenu yochel lahakrish sheyesh ktsas torach la'odam lahagia el nikiyus azos. Now, I cannot deny that a person will need some effort to attain this trait of nikiyut, of cleanliness. Af al pi kein omer ani, nevertheless I maintain, she'ein tzorich kol kach kamo shenira l'chora. It does not require as much effort as would seem at first glance. Ve'amachshava badovar hazeh kosher min ha'maseh. And the mental commitment in this matter is more difficult than carrying it out. Meaning like this. Remember we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we mentioned that if a person just recognized their flaw, any flaw that a person has, it already is more than halfway to repairing that flaw. But what's the difficulty? The difficulty is coming to terms and being intellectually honest about that reality. And that's what the Ramchal is saying here. He says the most difficult part is coming to terms with the reality, is allowing ourselves intellectually to accept this reality. That's the first step. Okay? So Ramchal is saying you might think it's so difficult. I'm telling you it's not difficult, says the Ramchal. Because, for example, if a person realizes that he's a jealous person, okay, so now I can work on it. If a person realizes that he is a honor-seeking person, now he can work on it. You understand that just by identifying the trait, good or bad, already is a very, very big part in changing it, or strengthening it, or weakening it, if it's a negative trait. Right? If we just identify it, I'll give you an example. If someone knows that they have a very big desire that they can't control when it comes to food, right? So most people just excuse it as like, I just like food, right? But if someone were to come to the conclusion, you know what? I just have a lack of control when it comes to desire, when it comes to desire of food. You know what happens? Now they can arm themselves with strengthening and distancing themselves from this, just by putting it into words and identifying it. Okay? So what Ramchal is telling us here is it's not so difficult. You might think it's so difficult to acquire this trait. It's not so difficult. You know what is difficult? To accept the reality that this is a trait that you possess. Once you accept that reality, it's much easier to change it. Okay? So he says like this. He says the mental commitment in this matter is more difficult than carrying it out, meaning perfecting it. Ki kasher yasim ha'adam belibo, for when a person commits himself in his heart, v'yikva b'ritzono b'kvius, and resolutely establishes his desire, lios mi bali amida tova azos, to be among those who master this wonderful trait, hine b'me'at hergel sheyargil atzmo b'zeh, then with a bit of training with which he accustoms himself to this practice, toshiv lo kalo harbe yosem mima shehaya yachol lachshov, it will become much easier than he could have ever imagined. Zeh davar shanisoin yochiach amito. This is something whose truth is proven by experience. So what Ramchal is telling us here, he's telling us, I'm telling you from experience, this is the key to success. When you're working on your traits, when you're working on your character, the first part is identifying it. The first part is being willing to accept the fact that you have this flaw. The minute you accept it, now you have nothing to worry about, because you're already more than halfway there to bringing yourself to perfection. So Ramchal the conclusion here is the trait of nikiyut, of cleanliness, of pristineness in our character, in our traits, applies to all the prohibitions of the Torah and to all negative character traits. It requires cleansing oneself of any impropriety in all those areas. Many examples have been provided, focusing on the prohibitions most commonly transgressed and the negative character most people commonly practice. These should be used as models for applying nikiyut, cleanliness, or pristineness to the remainder of the prohibitions and character traits. So if we use the similar approach to anger, we use the similar approach to any other negative trait, it should work perfectly. Although attaining nikiyut seems like a daunting task. Once a person sincerely resolves to attain it and practices it for a short while, it becomes much easier than one would have originally thought. Okay? So that concludes chapter 11. And now we are up to chapter 12. So let's get started. Let's go right into it. The way to acquire cleanliness. The true way, and this is the last chapter dealing with cleanliness. Next chapter is going to be abstinence. Okay? So this, I believe, sorry. It's a very short chapter. And what Ramchal is doing here is giving us a very quick tool to acquire this trait. So he says like this. Chapter 12, we're on page 262. The true means by which to acquire the trait of nikius, of cleanliness, hu hasmadas hakriya b'divrei chachamenu zichron l'bracha, is through constant study of the words of our sages of blessed memory. In b'inyonei halachos, both in subjects of Torah law, or in subjects of ethical instructions, right? For consider, after a person has already confirmed it for himself, the obligation of acquiring cleanliness and the necessity of mastering it, which will come after he has already attained the traits of zehirus, which is watchfulness, cautiousness, and zerizus, which is alacrity. So right, because those are the first two traits we spoke about in the ladder of Ramchal. Right, it starts off with knowing what we're here for, then goes to zehirus, which is watchfulness, and then it goes to zerizus, which is alacrity, because without the trait of alacrity, a person really doesn't have what it takes to move on to the next level, right? He says, by having engaged in the method of acquiring them and having distanced himself from the factors that detract from them. So think of it like this, okay? If I know that driving on a certain road, right, ruins my tires because there's bumps there and there's, potholes and there's all of these things, right? So what's the greatest way to avoid popping your tire? Don't go on that street, right? But you can't know that unless you know that there are those potholes. You don't know that unless you realize the deficiencies, right? But if a person were to have knowledge of it, right? For example, like our examples that we gave earlier about honor, about jealousy, about anger, all of these traits, if a person doesn't even know that he has them, so there are potholes in the middle of the street, he doesn't know are there. So what's the way to avoid them? Take a different route, right? Right? To fill up those potholes, many times it's not easy, right? It's very difficult sometimes to fill up those potholes. But what you could do very effectively is, right? What could you do? You could avoid falling into them. Go on a different route. Okay, and that's what Ramchal is telling us here. Ramchal is telling us that we have the ability to distance ourselves from these challenges. Okay? So he says like this. He says, which will come after he's already attained the traits of zehirut, of watchfulness, or cautiousness, and zerizus, which is alacrity, doing things without wasting time, without pushing them, without procrastinating. By having engaged in the methods of acquiring them and having distanced themselves from the factors that detract from them. There will, at this point, no longer remain before him any hindrance to acquiring Nikios. All right? There's not going to be anything stopping him from attaining this trait of cleanliness. Elo yedias hadikdukim asher b'mitzvos, except for gaining knowledge for the details of the commandments, each of the commandments, kedei sheyuchal lihizor b'kulam, so that he can be scrupulous in adhering to all of them. Okay, he says now as follows on 263. V'al kain. Okay, we have just a few more minutes here, and we're finishing this chapter. He says v'al kain hine tzorich lo behechrech. Therefore, it is absolutely necessary for him to have a thorough understanding, a thorough knowledge of the Torah's laws. To know how far the branches of subdivision of the subdivisions of the commandments reach. Additionally, since forgetfulness is common with these finer points of mitzvahs, he will require constant study and review of the books that clarify these details, to continually refresh recollection of them in his mind. Then, with comprehensive knowledge and constant review, he will surely be inspired to fulfill them. In this previous chapter, Ramchal specified that Nikius, cleanliness, and pristineness is necessary not only for actions and mitzvos, but for character traits, midos, right, as well. He now addresses this topic. V'chein be'inyon hamidos. The same is true regarding cleansing oneself from negative character traits. In order to acquire this dimension of Nikiyut, muchrachas lo kriyas ma'amarei Mussar. It is essential that one read the ethical discourses of our sages, lakadmonim o la'acharonim, whether they be the earlier or the more recent sages. Kipa amen rabos, for many, many times. Afilu achar sheyikva odam be'atzmo lios min hamedaktikim hanikim. Even after a person has firmly resolved to be among the meticulous ones who attains nikiyut, cleanliness, efshar lo sheyesham b'fratim. It is still possible for him to err in certain details, because his knowledge did not encompass them. Indeed, such errors are almost inevitable, for a person is not born wise. No person is born brilliant. Every person has to learn from life, from experience, from reading and learning and gaining knowledge from various different places. He says, therefore, it is impossible for a person to instinctively know everything. You know, it's very interesting that we say that Adam is Adamah because he's like the ground, and Adameh because he's supposed to emulate God. But there's something so much more fundamental. The name Adam is because man comes from earth. What does it mean, earth? Nothing grows from the earth unless you plant it. You don't just drive in West Texas and see an beautiful orchard and you see rows and rows and rows of corn, right? You won't see that just random unless someone planted it. Otherwise, you know what the earth will be? Desolate. It'll be empty. You won't suddenly find orchards there. You won't suddenly find fruit trees there. Someone had to plant it. It doesn't just come, right? That's a human being. A little kitten, take a little 2-hour-old kitten, and you put it at the rooftop. Take a little puppy, 2 hours old, put it at the rooftop. You know what's going to happen? They walk to the edge of the rooftop, they look down, they're like, not a good idea. They turn around and walk away. What happens if, God forbid, you would put a baby 6 months old on the rooftop? What would happen? It'd go right down. Why? Because it doesn't have instincts. It's Adamah, it's earth. If you don't plant, it won't grow. If you don't plant, it won't grow. It doesn't know things by itself. It needs to learn. Be very careful when you put hand into water because it might be steaming hot, right? And they learn. They learn that red means hot, blue means cold, usually, right? If you had a decent plumber, right? But that's the reality, is that if we don't learn, then we won't know. Life is about learning, right? So he says that nobody's just instinctively smart. You have to invest a lot of time into wisdom. However, through constant study of these matters, one will be awakened to that which he did not previously know. And will contemplate that which he did not previously discern. Including even that which he will not find in the sacred books themselves. For once one's intellect is awakened to the matter of perfecting his character traits, his mind will proceed to pay attention to all of the possibilities, right? And he will produce original ideas for self-improvement, which emanate from the source of truth, the Torah lessons set forth in the work of the sages. So what we have to understand is like this. If a person is awakened to this concept, to this idea of what it means to perfect themselves in observance of mitzvahs, to perfect themselves in observance of character traits, then once a person is really awakened to this, even without books, he can elaborate, he can learn, he can grow from it. And he can see, wow, you know what? That's a trait I shouldn't learn from. That's a trait I should learn from. This is a trait I should stay away from by all costs. This is a trait that I should try to replicate even if I fake it, right? Because the Torah says to us, Mitol shalom lishma balishma. Fake it till you make it is a Jewish concept, by the way. Not in a negative way, in a positive way. Fake it till you make it is an excellent tool. You know why? Because imagine this. Imagine a person is afraid to keep Shabbos, right? A person's afraid to keep Shabbos. So if a person just waits and waits and waits and waits till that time comes, it'll never come. But a person says, you know what? I'm going to jump in and I'm going to make believe I'm able to observe it. Then you know what happens? Eventually they'll be able to. Eventually they'll be able to do it even if they start for the wrong reason. Right? I have a friend of mine. A friend of mine called me and he said that he got to, when he was starting to learn about Judaism, he saw this really, really beautiful girl and he wanted to date her. So he went, a religious girl. He was secular, she was totally religious. So he went to her father, who he had become friendly with, and says, tell me, would you hypothetically ever let me date your daughter? Right? So he says, well, not unless you go to yeshiva. Right? Not unless you go to yeshiva. You don't go to yeshiva, you can't date my daughter. So you know what? He went to yeshiva, he became a religious Jew. And later on, he said, you know what? I want to date this guy's daughter. So he reached out to the man and he says, you know, you told me that if I went to yeshiva, you'd consider me dating your daughter. He says, not really. She's busy and it's not relevant. Right? So here's a guy who ran after a dream, maybe not for the right reasons even. He went to become religious and to go to yeshiva for all the wrong reasons, perhaps, maybe the right reason, because he wanted to date this girl. He wanted to be capable of dating this girl, and then eligible, right? And then turns out it didn't happen. So what is he going to say? Okay, I'm throwing it all out. Goodbye. Goodbye with Shabbos. I'm done with it. No, on the contrary. On the contrary. He went for the wrong reasons, but now keeps it for the right reasons. And it's very, very beautiful to do that. The Talmud talks about this. What do we do if we do a mitzvah? I do a mitzvah for my parents, honoring my parents, and do it for the wrong reason. You know what? One day you'll come to do it for the right reason. That's what our sages teach us. Very, very important principle. Okay? So he says as follows. Okay, so now there's another thing of knowing how to learn things out on your own. And not only on your own, this book is one of the great fundamental books of Mussar study. But there's not the only one. I have over here shelves and shelves of books that are all talking about different traits and how to attain those traits and how to learn from mistakes. And many of them are translated to English today, right? Really fascinating books, right? It's worthwhile. If you have the ability to focus, read them. You don't have to wait for the Mussar Mondays, right? You can read them on your own, right? Okay. Factors that detract from nikiyut, from this trait of cleanliness. You know what detracts from it? The factors that impair this trait are the same as all the factors that impair the trait of zihirus, which are preoccupation with worldly matters, levity, cynicism, and negative peer pressure, as discussed in chapter 5. V'nosaf aleim, in addition to these, we're going to add one. Chesron abekius b'yidias hadinim ob amusorim. There is also the lack of comprehensive knowledge of Torah laws or of ethical instructions. If a person doesn't know what anger is, then he can't stay away from it. If a person doesn't know what jealousy is, he can't stay away from it. If a person doesn't know what arrogance is, he can't stay away from it. So we also have to learn what it is in order for us to know to stay away from it. Kimosha kasafti, as I have just written. In this vein, the sages of blessed memory have already stated in this Mishnah. Below ama aretz chassid, an ignorant person cannot be a pious person. Ki mi shelo yeda ef shelo lasos. And the reason is obvious. For one who does not know cannot perform. If a person doesn't know a mitzvah, he can't perform the mitzvah. If a person doesn't, if a person is ignorant, he can't be pious, because you have to know what to do and what not to do. V'chein amru, and so our sages still said, Talmud gadol shemevi l'dei ma'isa. Study of Torah is of primary importance because it brings one to the performance of mitzvahs. So for someone to just think that once in a while I'll listen to a lecture, once in a while I will do a good deed, that's not going to change a person. A person has to immerse themselves in Torah study. A person has to dedicate themselves to Torah study. And in that way, in that vein, they are able to grow on a whole new level and really acquire this great trait of cleanliness. And like he said, you'll also get the trait of zihirus, which is watchfulness and cautiousness, and also zerizus, which is alacrity. So in summary here on page 266, once a person has mastered zihirus, which is watchfulness, or cautiousness, and zerizus, alacrity, and has recognized the necessity of nikius, he recognizes the necessity of being pristine and having cleanliness in all of his ways, he will be inspired to acquire this trait, but he must strive to acquire thorough knowledge of the halachic details of the various mitzvos and the ethical fine points of the various character traits. This necessitates constant study and review to ensure that he internalizes all the details and does not forget any subtle points. Constant engagement in study will further enable him to perceive even matters that are not found in any of the sacred writings. To attain cleanliness, one must also avoid the factors that detract from this trait, which are the same as those that detract from zihirus, like mentioned in chapter 5, that are someone who's preoccupied in worldly matters, someone who's just too lazy. He's heavy, like we mentioned in the beginning. Ki teva ha'adam kaved me'od. A person's nature is that we're heavy. We are heavy. If you ever say, oh, I'm so lazy, guess what? That's your nature. You got to get up and break out of it. Okay, that's what we need to do. And then the cynicism. being cynical of everything, being cynical of practices, and of course, negative peer pressure that we have to break away from, whether it be our colleagues, whether it be in our workplace, or even worse, if it's in our family. It's very difficult, and it's something we need to break away from and not shy away, because again, imagine if a father tells a son to do something for him, and then God tells the son to do something, and they contradict one another. Who do you listen to? The Creator, who gives you life in this world and life in the world to come, or the Father, who gives you life in this world only? Right? I think the Father who gives you everything, this world and the world to come, and that is Hashem. So if there's a kind, right? So we have to think of it from a broad perspective, and it's not easy. I'll tell you, it's not easy. Growing up in a religious home, so for me, it's been natural. But for those who grew up in a different home, where the parents perhaps weren't as observant, whether it be Shabbos or prayers 3 times a day, or putting on tefillin every day, or whatever those mitzvahs are, right? And now the child wants to accept it. Many times the parents have a difficulty with it, specifically because, what do you mean? You're telling me I wasn't a good enough father or mother? And it's very important for the children to maintain a very high level of respect for their parents, never ever to have any negative words to their parents, right? Certainly no resentment. I can't believe you raised me without this. I can't believe you. I've had people tell me this, right? And you have to be very careful of that, and to only share happiness and love with those people who are resentful towards your new ways. Because at the end of the day, right, that's what Torah is. Torah is the Torah is all about being kind and peaceful and pleasant and enjoyable. That's what it is. And a person should never shy away from who they are. Find a nice way to explain it. Find a nice way to share that joy and that happiness with other people. Okay, so this is the conclusion of chapter 12, and also a conclusion of the topic of the trait of cleanliness. And now, next week, God willing, I'm very excited. We're going to begin the trait of precious abstinence. Abstinence. Abstinence from worldly endeavors. We'll see what that means next week. We're going to define it, and we're going to see how to acquire this trait. But think of it from this perspective. Who has a better perspective of Earth? Us here sitting on Earth, or the astronauts who fly into outer space? The astronauts who fly into outer space. They have a big perspective. They realize how small we are when they see the magnitude of the majesty of the incredible universe that we live in. Right? We think we're so powerful. Look at me, I'm so capable. Look at me, I'm unbelievable. I drive a fancy car. Look at me, I have all this luxury. And then you fly out of space for 2 minutes, and you see, like, oh my goodness, we're like little ants, maggots, right? Teeny little worms. That's what we are, right? That doesn't mean that we're not great people. We are great people, and our sages continue to remind us of that. But in order to get a good perspective, you got to step out of the circle sometime. And that's what we're talking about next week, God willing. So, my dear friends, thank you so much. Are there any questions before we conclude? Any questions? You can unmute yourself and ask. Any questions? Okay, so we're going to sign off from our friends online. Thank you to our friends online. Thank you for watching, and please like and share these videos. We appreciate that so much. Have a terrific evening, and come again to the next